A husband gunned down on his anniversary.
There'd been no chance of surviving either shot.
A young family shattered by tragedy.
He never did anything to anybody.
But investigators are suspicious.
Ding, 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 something's not right. Immediately.
How come he didn't shoot you?
I don't know.
A depraved secret life is exposed.
They began to make films of their sexual escapades.
And a deadly plot revealed.
You know who murdered her?
I don't.
It is absolutely diabolical.
It can be the clearest day, the most beautiful day on the beach. But something happens whenever you pass 77th Avenue. It's almost like the air gets extra thick. It'll never be the same for me, knowing what happened there that night. It was a very typical night on the beach. Partially clear, a good moon, a little bit of wind. When I've got my lights on, I usually ride about 3 or 4 miles an hour, nice and slow, because we do have lots of people come up asking questions.
It's a busy shift, but the incidents are normally minor.
Anything from petty larceny to assaults that may occur, lots of fireworks calls.
It's just before midnight when Brown reaches a quiet residential section of the beach.
Here a woman comes walking from the front of my headlights on the driver's side, and I thought she was coming up to ask me a question, just like most people do. Shaking a little bit, had her hands muffled over her face. And I was expecting, I've lost my child, I've lost my dog. And she hits me with, someone just shot my husband. My immediate response was, what? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And she pointed across my headlights down towards the water. And I saw something on the beach. It was a white male that had been obviously shot in the head.
Brown immediately radios for help.
I've got shots fired. I've got one on the ground. I need some backup.
We heard over the radio there was shots fired on a beach, and we said, nah, that's got to be fireworks.
All units, 10-3.
When you hear 10-3, you automatically start to listen.
10-3, 10-3.
10-3 means something serious is going on.
10-4, you're on the beach, correct? Over there.
And then we heard some more that Scott needed help. He needed EMS, and he needed detectives down there.
10-4, who's with you? Right now by myself. Any crime scene?
Detectives Altman and Joyce head for the scene, where Brown is assessing the victim's injuries.
Being shot like he had been shot, I didn't try to render any assistance when he's been shot in the head. I fear for our safety now. My immediate concern was I look like a deer in headlights here. I've got floodlights on me, I'm being illuminated, I'm basically glowing in the dark out here, and I thought the person that had done the shooting was still in the immediate area.
Brown quickly ushers the woman into his truck and cuts the lights.
Let's protect this woman here, protect myself.
21-year-old Renee Poole tells Officer Brown that she and her husband Brent came to Myrtle Beach to celebrate their 3rd wedding anniversary. She says they were taking a romantic stroll when they were attacked.
Perimeter set up right here, then.
Officers arrive and set up around the crime scene. Renee, meanwhile, tells Brown that a masked man came up to them, forced them to lie on the beach, demanded her jewelry, and took her husband's wallet. Moments later, she says, he shot Brent twice in the head and then ran off.
Did he go towards the dunes area and the woods here? Sort of, that's the area I believe he's in.
An ambulance arrives. and Brent, still clinging to life, is rushed to a hospital. Police fan out, desperate to track down the shooter before he can attack again.
On the beach, approximately 100 yards south of 82nd Avenue, Wheelding crime scene. We're going to have to get the people up here and work these woods, I believe.
I'm asking, what did the person look like? To try to get a description so I can immediately get that out.
Renee says she couldn't see any of the man's features.
Wearing all black with a black ski mask. That's really the only description.
He's wearing all black, traveling towards Kings Highway. Black ski mask. We have the male wearing all black. Well, that's all we can get at this time. Ski mask, black, 1032.
The dogs came down to the beach and went to the wooded area in the direction that we got information that the shooter ran to.
But whoever shot Brent Poole has managed to slip the police dragnet.
Just cleared the gentleman on the moped. I checked all the new houses back here. I rode up through there once already.
And whatever clues he may have left have been compromised.
I knew the ambulance people had already been down there and everything was just kicked around, tussled around.
There's a lot of foot tracks on the beach. So as far as a crime scene for evidence, it was kind of messed up.
We were trying our best to preserve what we had because we did have blood. We did find a couple shells.
The 9mm shells are live, possible misfires. Police also find a beach towel, but there's little else to go on. While Brent Poole lingers in the hospital with a grave head injury, investigators hope his wife can remember something that will put them on the shooter's trail. Renee tells police that she and Brent left their daughter Katie at their beachfront hotel with a babysitter.
What time did the babysitter get there?
I think she got there roughly about 9 because she couldn't find the hotel, and she called. I told her we'd probably be gone for 2 or 3 hours.
Okay, so you planned on being back at?
Probably about 12.
About midnight?
Yeah, about 12 at the latest.
They went to several local night spots for drinks, dinner, and a couple of games of pool.
He was getting kind of bored with playing pool, so he said, well, I'm ready to go. How about you? Yeah, let's just go ahead and go.
Mm-hmm.
Renee says her husband wanted to stop at a store and then head to the beach.
And got beach towels. He wanted to make love on the beach because it was their anniversary.
Okay.
They returned to their hotel.
From there, we walked onto the beach, and we got up to an area where we didn't see anyone. He laid the towel out, and we were there probably 10 to 15 minutes, maybe.
Renee tells police that as they walked back to the hotel after making love, they noticed someone following them.
The next thing I remember, the dog was lady.
Can you tell if he's a white man or if he's a black man?
He had a ski mask.
Any particular type of ski mask?
I don't know.
Was the eyes cut out?
I think so.
What about the mouth area? Was that cut out?
I don't think so.
The masked man then demanded the couple's valuables.
They had given everything. They had given over their jewelry and given a wallet.
But the robber wasn't finished.
He went back over my husband. And my husband was using shooting. He said, why should I? He said, because I have a daughter that I love. And I had the gun go off.
How many shots did you hear?
At this point, the police are really baffled. They have no idea what has happened. Maybe it's a random act. Maybe it's some crazed killer. Maybe it's a robbery having to do something with drugs.
Searching the entire beach for even the tiniest shred of evidence, police finally get a break. Brent's wallet, found in a yard just a short distance from the site of the shooting. But it's a suspicious discovery.
In his wallet, there was still the cash, the credit cards, and his driver's license. It looked like to the police that someone had just tossed the wallet to get rid of it.
Now we got a lot of questions. Why didn't he take the stuff that he stole from him?
Within hours, police get word from the hospital that Brent has died.
The pathologist said that would be fatal. There would be no chance of surviving either shot. This was a person who was complying fully, did nothing but actually asked that his life be spared.
So I'm like, well, Dr. Duffy, what do you think happened? And I remember him, he goes, I can tell you exactly what happened. He goes, this is an execution.
This is somebody plainly, I am doing this deliberately, and I am doing this to kill you.
As news of the killing spreads, the resort town is gripped with fear.
The whole thing wasn't making sense because we don't get people killed on a beach.
Myrtle Beach has always been family-oriented. It is for families.
Our economic engine is tourism, and we have literally millions of tourists that come here, particularly in the summertime.
The longer the killer is out there, the more Myrtle Beach and its visitors stand to lose.
Oh, that's so sad. Yeah.
It has to be solved very quickly, very rapidly.
After 24 hours, the case is still stone cold. And all investigators know about their suspect is that he was out for blood.
He wanted Brent Poole not to walk away from the beach that night. He wants Brent Poole dead in the very worst way.
Who wanted Brent Poole dead? When we come back, a young couple, secret lives, and a devious plan. A young husband is gunned down during a stroll on the beach with his wife at one of the country's most popular vacation spots.
Late Tuesday night, this crime watch zone became a crime scene.
As her husband's body lay in a Myrtle Beach morgue, Renee Poole and her daughter Katie head back to their home in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Renee spent a lot of time at our house and would sit with us and watch the newscast, of this. They were calling it the murder on the beach.
Searching for a motive, investigators take a closer look at the victim, Brent Poole.
Brent was just a fun-loving, easy-go-lucky. Things were always good with him, and if they weren't good, they were going to get better.
When he was 17 years old, he fell head over heels with a fast-living 14-year-old named Renee Summy.
He brought her home to school one day, and then they started dating.
Brent acted like Renee was the best thing that ever happened to him. Every time he talked about her, he lit up. All he ever wanted to do was hang out with her.
On the surface, they seemed an odd pair. Rebellious Renee and cheery, optimistic Brent. But they clicked and were virtually inseparable.
The sexual activity started early for Brent and Renee. Every time that they were together, it seemed like they were having sex. In between periods at school, Renee would come out of class, meet Brent in the parking lot. Brent would be parked there with his truck. The local joke was, if that truck of Brent's is rocking, don't come a-knocking.
By 1995, 3 years after they met, Renee dropped out of high school and was working at Home Depot. Brent was just starting his career as a truck mechanic.
He progressed very quickly up the ladder, and he was doing very well.
Renee was just 17, Brent 21.
Then she got pregnant. I didn't want her to marry him. She said, she was going to make it right.
In June 1995, Brent and Renee were married in the rustic log cabin where she grew up.
They both seemed very excited about it. They were planning their lives together.
But just 3 years later, the young wife is now a grieving widow.
Do you have any idea why someone would want to kill your husband?
He never did anything to anybody. He never did anything. He was so good.
You have a 2-year-old daughter. If you told her, does she know? She doesn't know.
She asked about her daddy. I'm going to just tell her that Daddy's not here.
What are you thinking right now?
I keep thinking that he's going to come home. I can't believe it. I don't want to believe it.
The tragic story of the high school sweethearts is broadcast throughout the Southeast.
Then the phone calls started coming in. A lot of them. And they said, most of the calls were, "What do you mean, loving couple?"
That's when it got pretty interesting pretty quickly.
We decided that the answers that we needed was not going to be in Myrtle Beach. It was going to be in North Carolina.
The phone calls had lit a path there, but getting to the truth in Winston-Salem wasn't going to be easy.
There are a lot of churches here. It is almost smack in the Bible Belt. Winston-Salem is very fundamental and a very conservative area.
When I would talk to Renee, I saw a lot of and heard a lot of boredom with her. Boredom with her life, with, you know, where she was headed, with what she was doing, and she just wanted more.
And as investigators find out, motherhood wasn't cutting it for Renee.
And she would call Agnes and my wife and tell her this baby was driving her crazy.
She would just say she needed a break, that Katie was driving her nuts and she needed somebody to watch her.
Agnes said, "We'll bring her over, I'll watch her a while." And this happened so many times during the week, I mean, over and over again.
These calls would often come in the evening while Brent was at work.
I kept calling her house at night. I called till about 11, 12 o'clock, and never could get an answer, so I kind of figured something was up.
Renee had found a remedy for her boredom at a strip club called the Silver Fox. Exotic dancing came easy.
And Renee is very creative and a quick study.
She just seemed very excited about the whole world, the whole stripper world. She dressed provocatively inside and outside of work. I remember one night she came to the club and she was actually wearing a dress that she was going to dance in that night. And she basically came in and fluffed her hair, stuck some lipstick on, and went on the floor.
Before long, Renee was earning as much as $1,500 a night.
Renee was offered, in many cases, not only to have sex outside of the club, but to take lavish trips. One guy even offered her 2 weeks' salary to come and clean his house in the nude.
Renee was also popular in the club's VIP room.
It was a shower that you could see into, and there was a couch in front of it.
She would take Perch shampoo that would light up under the black lights. Of course, on the outside of the petition was a gentleman who was paying a hefty fee to watch Renee take a shower with another girl.
When her husband caught wind of Renee's new job, he was surprisingly supportive and proud.
He would take his friends to the club and brag and say, "That is my wife. Why don't you pay for her to give you a lap dance or a tabletop dance? Or why don't you take her to the back room?"
And that was just the start.
He was picking out different people in the club, different girls, asking Renee to bring them home to participate in a menage a trois, in a threesome with him and Renee.
Brent and Renee's hedonistic lifestyle was their dirty little secret.
Maybe I'm a stupid mother. I don't know, but I didn't know any of that was going on.
When we return, Renee's wild behavior reaches a whole new level of decadence.
Promiscuous would be a nice way to say it.
They began to make films of their sexual escapades.
Investigators in the Brent Poole murder are beginning to realize his grieving widow may not be what she appears.
He never did anything to anybody. He was so kind.
Police confiscate the Poole's computer and uncover a string of sexually explicit emails between Renee and various men.
Apparently Renee was just prolific.
So it was obvious to us that she was promiscuous, would be a nice way to say it.
Questioning Renee's boyfriends, detectives learned that many of her liaisons took place in her home while Brent was at work and Katie was with her grandparents.
She would call us and tell us lies about, what the circumstances was.
Brent was either in the dark or in deep denial.
I don't know that he tried to do anything, to stop her until it escalated into, phone calls that he would get at work.
And they're telling him, do you know where your wife is? Do you know that your wife is sleeping with everyone over town?
Then, Renee's infidelity reached a new level of outrageousness with a lover named Danny.
They began to make films of their sexual escapades.
And discretion wasn't Renee's strong suit.
Renee sent these films, these sexually explicit tapes, to the home of Brent Poole's parents.
I'm thinking, here's a person who has absolutely no morals, none whatsoever. And this is not a good relationship. It's not a good marriage under these circumstances.
For Bill Poole, Brent's next move should have been obvious.
I would have loved to have gotten Brent out of the marriage.
But Brent wouldn't hear of it.
Brent had a huge capacity for loving. And once he's committed, he's committed. And that's how he was with Renee. He loved her, in my opinion, beyond reason.
She could manipulate him into doing whatever she wanted him to do. She had total control over him.
A lying, cheating wife. A marriage on the rocks. Investigators now wonder if Renee had motive to get rid of her husband. They take a closer look at her account of the attack.
First of all, why is it that a person shot the husband, Brent Poole, but yet did not harm the wife?
This kid shot, in the head, and there's nothing on her at all. No punch mark. She hasn't been punched, hit, shot, nothing.
To police, it simply doesn't make sense.
If you're going to rob and kill somebody or shoot somebody, why are you going to leave a witness there?
Poring over Renee's statement, investigators find more inconsistencies.
She did tell me that the gunman made them lay down on the sand. But whenever I got her into the truck, as I ran my hand around her waist, there wasn't any sand on her shirt. That doesn't coincide with what she was telling me, right off the bat.
Renee said that the robber had taken all of their jewelry, had taken their wedding rings.
But that doesn't jive with Brown's recollection.
She was twisting a wedding band in her hand. And again, bells are going off. Hey, this woman's husband has been shot. And she's telling me that she was robbed. Yet she's holding a wedding band in her hand. Ding, 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 something's not right.
3 days after her husband's murder, police bring Renee back in for questioning.
No questions and there'll be no answers.
You had to treat her as a victim on one side, but on the other side, she was the top of the list of a potential suspect.
None of this makes any sense of why he would shoot this guy twice. Your husband, the father of your child, and leaves you there. Can you explain this?
No, I can't.
And you're really showing no emotion at all about this.
I've already told him I'm crying.
It kind of floored me. There's no distress in her. There's no sign of emotion.
This is the time to come clean on this. Stop the circus that's going on.
I'm telling you what I know.
You know who murdered Brent.
Renee Poole is under investigation in her husband's murder. But who was the trigger man? As police soon discover, Renee had started an affair with a Silver Fox regular just a few months before Brent's death.
At this time in Renee's life, she needed a perfect gentleman. She needed someone who just would spend time and money and energy, just lavish her with affection. And John Boyd Frazier stepped right in. John Boy Frazier's a barfly. He loves strippers. He collected strippers like people collect stray cats.
And he had a history of taking in women, you know, buying them things, taking care of them.
The 28-year-old computer technician also had a history of run-ins with police.
There had been threats, there had been standoffs, there had been assaults with his ex-girlfriends. There had been reports that he had assaulted them, that he had pulled a gun on them, that he had followed them in their car and attacked them.
I mean, really kind of a loser. I mean, he had just sort of bounced around, just sort of a young guy who never found himself, and then he found Renee Poole.
And yet again, Renee managed to keep her husband in the dark.
Brent, he had no idea what was going on.
When Brent was at work, Frazier and Renee rendezvoused at the Poole's house. If Brent was home, Renee improvised.
Renee would say, I'm going to a park and I'm taking Katie. She would drive across town and she would go to John Boyd Frazier's house.
Investigators learned that in early May 1998, 5 weeks before Brent was killed, Renee wanted out.
Brent comes home one night and he finds the house totally empty. Both Renee and Katie are gone.
Brent was so upset. I mean, he was just beside himself.
He finds out that she's moved in with John Boyd Frazier.
But Brent is forgiving and determined to woo Renee back.
I said, Brent, can you forgive her? And his comment was, I've done it before, I can do it again.
He goes to his parents. He seeks to be consoled by them.
I tried telling him, Brent, leave it alone, leave it alone. You need to get out of this. And he absolutely wouldn't listen.
According to the couple's neighbors, while Brent was trying desperately to salvage his marriage, Renee was determined to end it.
Frazier takes her to a lawyer. Lawyer says, Renee, we can get you out of this marriage, but we can't get you the baby.
He pretty much just said, you know, cut me a break. If you think you can do this topless dancing, have all these affairs, and still get custody of Katie, you are mistaken.
Renee Poole was in a quandary.
The attorney told her, you need to go back in and stay in and then make a decision to leave.
If she didn't go back, she's going to walk away with nothing.
10 days later, Renee moved back home.
He was excited, so excited, that she was coming back.
But according to witnesses, Renee didn't share her husband's excitement.
She told her neighbors that she wasn't going to be there long. She made no effort to unpack anything.
As soon as she moves in, she's still in communication with Frazier.
She tells her husband that she wants to plan a family vacation.
As soon as she moved back in, this was her number one project around the house. She announces that she wants to go to Myrtle Beach for their anniversary to rekindle the fire with her husband, Brent Poole.
Brent was just going on and on about how much fun this was going to be. They'd never taken Katie to the beach.
All he really wants to do is reconcile with his wife. And, you know, what better way than to have a romantic, you know, weekend in Myrtle Beach on their anniversary.
Then, investigators make a stunning discovery. An email from Frazier to his boss requesting some time off.
They found out the very days that he claimed that he was sick were the very same days that Renee and Brent Poole had gone to the beach.
Following Frazier's trail, investigators uncover more suspicious behavior.
He had borrowed a friend's car. Never borrowed his car before. Never borrowed it for a period of days, which he'd done on this occasion.
Crime scene investigators immediately scour the car for clues. But it's clean. Maybe too clean.
It was thoroughly cleaned. I mean, it was spick and span. And for a guy who borrowed a car for a day or two, and then to return it in, you know, a pristine condition was very suspicious to us as well.
The handgun that killed Brent Poole was never found, but investigators take another look at the live shells discovered at the crime scene.
They had developed a history of this particular gun. It was an Italian-made model.
They learned that Frazier owned a 9mm handgun, the same caliber as the murder weapon.
And the people that they traced the gun back to, who originally sold it to John Boyd Frazier, said, one of the reasons that I got rid of this gun is because it jammed. You never knew when it was going to jam, but it jammed.
Investigators review Renee Poole's statements from the night of the murder.
I heard the gun click.
Like a misfire?
And I think I heard it a couple more times.
2 to 3 times?
Maybe.
It certainly was consistent with the handgun that he had previously owned.
Next, investigators examine Frazier's statement, focusing on where he claimed to have been the night of the murder.
He has no alibi. He's got nobody in this world, according to him, that can vouch for where he was during this time frame.
They confront Renee again.
I remember distinctly asking her, was this John Frazier?
Was John on the beach that night?
No, not that I know of, no. It's very okay, but I don't
That does not make sense.
Your heart's pounding like, she's ready to give it up. And so you just try to pull it out more of her.
Don't think we can. Don't go under the thing. Don't try to protect them.
Oh, I'm not.
I just wanted to keep going and going and going until we could get it out of her.
More than 3 hours later, Altman finally gets what he's waiting for.
You want to change that story as to who you believe killed your husband?
Jane,
Who is it? John who?
Frazier.
Do you have any question in your mind but that it was John Frazier?
No.
No doubt whatsoever?
No.
Renee, what really happened to Brent?
Both Renee Poole and her lover John Boyd Frazier are arrested and charged with the murder of Brent Poole, just hours before his grieving family attends his funeral.
How evil can you be to act like nothing, has happened as far as her involvement with this, knowing what she knows?
Renee Poole and her lover John Boyd Frazier are tried separately for their alleged roles in the murder of Renee's husband, Brent. Prosecutors rely on Renee's own confession to prove their case against both of them.
You planned this with John.
Yes.
You planned to have Brent killed in Myrtle Beach with John Frazier.
We had
Renee,
about it.
You planned to kill Brent with
Yes.
John in Myrtle Beach, didn't you?
Yes. He said he got me an anniversary present.
Her anniversary present was going to be to take care of Brett Poole.
You get him on the beach and I'll give you a present. I'll give you a dead husband.
Earlier that day, Brent Poole had checked his wife and daughter into the hotel. Everything seemed perfect.
Brent thought at that point he had it all. This is what I wanted. This is what I prayed about. Life couldn't get any better. And he had no clue.
Prosecutors maintain that Frazier and Renee had carefully planned the events that night.
She had to be in certain places at certain times in order to, for Frazier to know where they were and what time frame they were on. It was very well choreographed.
First, Renee had to get Brent out of their hotel room.
When the babysitter arrived, Katie, the child, was unconsolable. She didn't want her dad to leave.
Anybody that knew Brent and Katie would tell you that Katie was a daddy's girl. They had a strong, very strong bond. And she said, Daddy, no, don't go. And he said, Katie, I promise you, I'll take you out to the big sandbox tomorrow, which is what she called the beach.
But Renee didn't have any more time to linger.
We've got to go. It's like, this is their anniversary, but she's got a timetable. But she's rushing Brent out the door.
Renee knew that her daughter was not going to have a father in a matter of hours.
Renee had insisted on choosing the restaurant that night.
John Frazier had been to Dick's previously because a cousin of his had worked at Dick's. That was a place she could say, "We'll be," because John knew the restaurant.
Then the Pools left the restaurant. Frazier followed.
They go to another location that's nearby in the same general vicinity to play pool and have a drink.
She sends Brent in to get a towel. Of course, he's more than willing to do that because he knows what that's going to mean.
He goes on the beach thinking he's going to make love to his wife. Brent is probably the most relaxed, the most comfortable, and the happiest he has been in probably all of his life.
She takes him down north, where it gets very dark. Takes him in the dunes. They have sex.
I think to Renee, that was probably the easiest part of the night. Sex was just something she did. It was just part of the plan. It was just 1, 2, 3, 4, and that was number 4. And then she said, "Take over, John. It's your turn." And that was the end.
How much more can his defenses be down?
Yeah, he never stood a chance. He never stood a chance.
Prosecutors contend that Frazier then raced from the beach to his getaway car, while Renee waited more than 5 minutes before flagging down Officer Brown.
To be standing there and watching your husband bleed to death, to give your lover a chance to run away, you can't be any colder if you wanted to.
The state of South Carolina versus Kimberly Renee Poole.
The prosecution has a strong case, but to ensure a conviction, they have to place Frazier in Myrtle Beach.
We had very little in terms of a statement from Frazier.
And so our case against Frazier really focused on ID. It was an identity case.
Mark and Donna Hobbs were at the hotel the night Brent was murdered.
And they saw this guy, and he was sort of an unusual-looking guy. He's dressed in an unusual fashion.
Think about it. Here's a guy in the middle of June who's down there in black, who's all shaky and all nervous, and he's walking around and he's looking up at the hotel rooms. Either we got a peeping Tom or we got some kind of a perpetrator.
Police show the Hobbses a lineup of potential suspects.
And they both pointed independently to the picture of John Boyd Frazier. His features are very memorable. He has a high forehead, he's got a wide, big head, and he's got bulging eyes. And Donna Hobbs said, "It was the bulging eyes that I remember the most. These are the ones that were most frightening to me."
The Hobbses testify that they first saw Frazier that night lurking in the shadows outside the hotel.
And saw him again as he's walking down to the beach and sort of headed north toward the area where the crime was committed.
They were the only people who could put John Boyd Frazier in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina the night of the murder. They were unshakable.
Their testimony cripples any hope for John Boyd Frazier's defense team.
Are you still innocent?
Frazier is sentenced to life without parole.
Did you think you were going to get away with it?
The case against Renee Poole was a confession case, if you want to say that. Her statements were close to being confessions.
As the jury in Renee's trial ponders a verdict, she seems convinced she's going to get off.
It's downright festive on Renee Poole's side. They're laughing, they're joking.
I mean, she was just cackling. She's making party plans.
I'm telling you, it was a circus atmosphere on the other side until the verdict came back.
The state of South Carolina versus Kimberly Renee Poole, indicted for count 1 murder. The verdict is guilty.
She fell to pieces. Fell to pieces.
When she was found guilty, it was the first and only time that she showed any sort of emotion. I mean, she came apart.
I see no basis in this world for showing you any mercy. The judgment and sentence of this court is that you be confined in the state penitentiary for the balance of your life.
Life without parole. And in South Carolina, that means until you die in prison.
Katie's, been living with us since Brent's death, and she has grown up into a very beautiful young lady, and she misses her daddy terribly. And you don't think that you can ever be betrayed by someone who is a family member like she betrayed all of us. You just can't believe that'll ever occur.
She was just like a black widow spider. She was as cold-blooded as that. She mates, and then she kills. And that's exactly what Renee Poole did in this case.
Every time I think I've seen the worst thing one human being can do to another, I see the next case. But I gotta tell you, this case, it stopped me. If there is a diabolical female in this world, Renee Poole is that person.